The Chimeran threat practically brought all of Earth's militaries to its knees in a very short period of time. Continuing their rampage across the globe, these alien soldiers would continue to slaughter countless more, pushing humanity closer and closer to the brink of extinction. That being said, these particular creatures were not exactly completely foreign to Earth, or even foreign to the human race, as they were actually once human themselves. So today we are clearly going to be covering the Chimeran hybrid. So grab your bow-guarded alien technology and dig in as we learn about the lore and morphology of the Chimera hybrid from the Resistance franchise. As with all beginnings, to understand the Chimera and their goals brings you back to the original Chimera from long ago. For those that watch my video giving you a crash course into the Resistance franchise, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you that didn't, basically the Chimera were here for 65 million years ago in their pure, regular species form. They were ousted during a war with an unknown species and left. Upon their arrival back to Earth, they have come into contact with humans, and during this time, they seem to have developed a type of virus capable of removing all mental traits from humans and replacing them with Chimeran traits. So, now you're basically up to speed. The Chimeran hybrid is nothing more than a human who was infected, much like many other humans, with this engineered virus. This particular virus was created by a pure Chimera in an effort to wipe out a planet's defenses and begin their invasion. It's actually quite a brilliant idea if you stop to think about it. We as humans always assume that if a species wants Earth, they would have to come down here and fight us for it. But ask yourself, do humans do that? Believe it or not, we really don't. Look no further than the discovering of the New World. Smallpox was used to wipe out droves of people in the Aztec Empire and break armies before they even had a chance to fight. So why would a species want to waste manpower or alien power on fighting humans? Exactly. They could easily just drop a virus on us and let the problem take care of itself. This is exactly what the Chimeran virus does, and even then, it takes it a step further. Upon its usage, it spreads out into an ecosystem, infecting every animal in the area. However, it doesn't just kill the animal, it turns the animal into a fighting soldier to take out even more humans or other animals in the area. Liken it to almost like a dose of lethal injection that then turns any living cells cancerous afterwards. It can completely annihilate a species in a short amount of time, as for each human that falls, it is then added to the Chimera. But what sort of monster has this virus yielded in terms of morphological traits? One that takes human traits and ramps them up to insane levels. But starting with the smallest unit, how are these morphological traits induced? When the virus enters the bloodstream, a person is rendered comatose. Here the virus begins to inject its genetic coding into cells, slowly but surely changing the host over time. In the events of the first game, Nathan Hale was infected but had natural antibodies capable of keeping the virus at bay. But notice I say at bay. Not completely turning the tide, it was simply resistant, not immune. For normal humans, their bodies are picked up and then taken to factories where their transformation is accelerated. After a human's metamorphosis is complete, exteriorly, there are quite a few differences. But the changes to the interior is where the real shift from human to Chimera has taken place. One thing should be noted, while anecdotal, some Chimera have been seen carrying around possessions of their former lives, but are still hostile. Perhaps it has some humanity left inside of its brain case, but clearly not enough to prevent this creature from attacking friends and family on sight. So, moving on, starting with the feet, you can see there are some differences between a human's foot and a Chimera's. Basically, a toe seems to have been lost at some point, but in others, they are even going to have more toes missing, as some will have 3, whereas later on they will have 4. Why this is the case is strange, seeing as the hands have 4 fingers and 1 thumb, but genetically there must be a reason for it. The toes are tipped with essentially what are going to be claws, not really used for fighting and are usually covered up with armor or shoes. These toes do not serve much of a function outside of the use of our own toes, it seems. Perhaps like much of our own traits, these traits carried over from a past form, or it could be that the human DNA has interacted with a way that has caused these type of claws to grow. Moving further up the legs, we can see that they are quite stocky. Large muscles now take the place of the more slender muscles of the original person. These muscles have afforded the Chimera rapid bursts of speed to get across open ground and take cover. Their legs can also be assumed to be quite powerful and could, in theory, break human bones should you ever be kicked by one. The fast twitch muscle fibers seem to have been overhauled, again, making the Chimeran hybrid really fast. The abdomen and torso of the Chimera hybrid is very large and thick with 3 C's, at least in later games. I may have a hypothesis on this concerning these size discrepancies though, so let's cover that real quick. When the Chimera exploded out of Europe, many of the civilians were converted. Typically, civilians consisted of women, children, and elderly during this time, as men were usually going to be soldiers, and they were accepting soldiers as young as 14 at this time. It's possible that during the initial blitz, units, the men were killed off engaging the Chimera, while the women, children, and elderly were converted into the hybrids via spires. This yielded smaller Chimera during the events of the first game, but by the time the third game rolled around, soldiers were being converted at alarming rates, leading to much larger and thicker hybrids. Just a thought, but logistically it does make sense as to why morphologically these creatures got larger as the game continued. Anyhow, the muscle in the chest and presumably the abdomen has increased in size, as clearly compared to its original form, this newer form has a much greater amount of power. The arms of the Chimera are large but appear somewhat sinewy, at least once again in the early games. As time progresses, the arms became larger, and this reasoning is potentially there was more biomass available for the Chimeran virus at the time that metamorphosis took place. Moving down the hands, we see all 5 fingers are still intact and in place. These fingers are also tipped with sharp claws capable of slashing deep into enemies in case a need for hand-to-hand combat should ever arise. This, coupled with the overall strength of the hybrid, would spell an end to a person who chose to engage it just with their hands, which is a really bad idea, by the way. Getting to the head in a moment, we can see that the hybrid is very much so human in form. All the standard traits of a human are there, with some minor changes concerning muscle size and toes. A new thicker and tougher skin now completely lines the alien's body, making it tougher and more resistant to objects used against it, but also meaning that bullets do less damage as they would on regular humans. The hybrids also stood taller than your average human at about 187 centimeters, or around 6 foot 1 inches to about possibly 2 inches. Without its cooling unit, an average hybrid is not much heavier than a regular man around the same height, weighing in at 87 kilograms or 192 pounds. That being said, the weight is almost pure muscle and bones, sporting very little fat, so its weight is virtually all usable, unlike a human's. Now back on track, let's discuss the head and brain of this creature, as there are some clear differences you can see, and perhaps some things that you might not know about it that's going on internally. The hybrid sports 6 eyes in total. 2 of these eyes are binocular, meaning that they can see a creature, or really you, from really far away. But the regular eyes that run up the temporal areas of the head also give the Chimera a slight advantage, as it can see around itself in greater detail, or at least in range than a human can, but where they sit, they can also look forward. Essentially meaning you would not be able to sneak up on a hybrid very well. The mouth of the hybrid reveals the savagery of this creature. Multiple dagger-like teeth are housed in the mouth of the previous human, and all grinding teeth have been lost. This species has taken your meat suit and turned it from omnivorous to completely carnivorous. However, the Chimera are scavengers as well. Upon an autopsy done on a dead hybrid, it was found that it contained both human meat as well as hybrid meat inside of its stomach, meaning that after a battle, these still living hybrids eat humans dead or alive, but also engage in cannibalism, eating other dead hybrids. The mouth is also much larger in this creature, meaning that it is a completely viable weapon to be used in combat. This would also mean that the jaw of a human would need to have been snapped and reformed to be much larger, which would also indicate that bone has been added, so it's been strengthened. Now this is where we start getting into the actual anatomy of this creature, which is incredibly fascinating. A dissection was performed on the hybrid, and when getting to the brain, they found that it was completely altered. The frontal lobe, which is responsible for like logic and thought, which you and I enjoy, has shrunk in size and essentially fused, meaning that very little individual thought was taking place in this creature. But once again, I do have to reference how some, I guess, objects of importance, or really even non-importance from an outside perspective looking in, were kept by the Chimera for some reason or another. Anyhow, this shrunken frontal lobe means that very little individual thought was taking place, and considering they operate under a hive mind, this is to be expected. They are not supposed to be responsible for their own thinking, so another creature does that for them. One portion of the brain in particular has increased in size, and that is the medulla. Okay, so join me if you will for a bit of an explanation. Way back on the Hunter episode, I had mentioned something called the lizard brain, and I got a lot of complaints calling me an idiot because humans don't have lizard brains, but clearly I think the point might have been missed, or maybe I didn't explain it well enough. So throughout time, our brains have evolved, and specifically in humans, they've gotten larger. Starting with the most basic nervous system of, say, a jellyfish, for instance, you would not say that they have a brain, but they have the beginning portions of a brain. So think of it this way. The brain has different parts, almost like rooms to a house. As a creature advances, different rooms are added to this house, so different parts are added to the brain, until eventually, millions of years ago, you have the most basic parts responsible for keeping a lizard alive, such as the pons, the midbrain, the medulla, a small cerebrum, things of that nature, So like hunting instincts, all of that, reasoning, well, a little bit of reasoning. That would be like the dinosaurs. There is more, but you kind of get my point. So comparing a lizard brain to a human's brain, clearly the human's brain cerebrum is larger and more complex. So a lizard brain isn't actually a lizard's brain. It's basically the most basic functions of your brain that keep you alive and running, which are located on the lower portion of the brain, or what is called like the old brain. And then as time progressed, our brains advanced outwards and got larger. So now that we're done with that explanation, the strange thing about hybrids is that the medulla is enlarged quite a bit. This has afforded the creature the ability to operate despite extreme damage, as the signals are still strong enough to be sent to basically say, keep moving. I would also hypothesize 3 or more areas have been increased in size concerning the brain. The occipital lobe on the back of the head being the first, the limbic system being the second, and the hypothalamus being the third. The occipital lobe is used to decipher the incoming information from the 6 eyes, so pulling triple duty, it would definitely need to be larger. The limbic system to push the creature into aggression, and fits to decimate humans, and the hypothalamus to explain the metabolism. It should be noted at this point that the other internal organs have also been altered in some form or another. For instance, the liver is now much smaller of an organ, and a lot of the other organs have been decreased in size strangely, almost in contrast with the metabolism. But since we are on the topic of the metabolism, let's discuss it. As we all know, the hypothalamus is responsible for regulating both the metabolism and body temperature of an organism. So when the virus alters the brain in the ways that it is, it too changes this particular portion of the brain. The Chimeran body runs in overdrive concerning these 2 traits. Its body temperatures are apparently much greater than ours, as they desire to live on a freezing planet with temperatures that would kill us, as shown when they were terraforming Earth, but also because of their need for cooling units plugged directly into their bodies. While painful, it is quite necessary, as without them it appears they would cook themselves. This increased body temperature appears to just be a consequence of their metabolism, however. Metabolism is an interesting thing concerning heat. Have it too high and the cells cook under their own production. Too low and they slow down and wounds take forever to heal. The metabolism of a chimera is one that seems to have geared itself towards the healing of a creature rather than finding that perfect median. Or maybe it has found a perfect median adapted to a planet which is frozen. Again, the hybrids require a cooling apparatus that actually cools down their internal temperature, and this prevents the chimera from outright dying on Earth from what essentially would be heat stroke. It can be assumed that their home planet at this point would have the excess body heat whisked away by the frigid temperature all around them. With this problem solved, their body can continue to operate, which means healing at an increased capacity well beyond the capabilities of our own bodies. So the hybrids are able to survive gunshot wounds and explosions that would quite easily take you or me out, and they recover from most wounds that could be deemed fatal. One of the things that I think should be noted about the hybrids is that their DNA isn't actually pure Chimeran. They are simply a bridge between the 2 species. The DNA seems to incorporate both human and Chimeran traits, and this could be for a multitude of reasons, but one of the main ones, at least in my mind, could be for adaptability. Humans are extremely adaptable and inquisitive. These have been known to be our better traits that helped us rise to the top. While not known if these traits are innate in the pure Chimera, they seem to be very clearly displayed in the hybrids, or at least the hive minds that control them. An example would be the hybrids learning the British tactics in battle, and in mere weeks, this gave them an edge and they were able to overrun the British entirely. The adaptability of humans is fairly pronounced, but when mixed with pure Chimeran DNA, it would also give the hybrids a chance of existing on Earth, as perhaps the pure Chimera are not able to live on such a planet, as in fact it could be deemed too hot, or perhaps the local flora would cause issues, much like how it did in War of the Worlds. And contrary to what I have said above, or at least just now, it is also possible that the Chimeran fusion with human DNA has yielded some maladaptive traits. Again, the heat sinking issues are a major drawback, and it could be that the Chimera are naturally cold-blooded, and instead of hailing from a frozen world, simply needing a frozen world to live on is more in line because their physiology after fusing with humans is no longer compatible with our planet in the Goldilocks zone. However, to make a guess on how the human genome has impacted the Chimeran genome, more study would need to be done and compared to the original physiology of the parent species or pure Chimera. Either way, I'm hoping for Resistance 4 because who knows, maybe it'll get explained a little better and in greater detail. So this one was a lot of fun to cover, simply from the genome aspect and what the fusion of the 2 DNA sequences would actually yield. Anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed the video over the Chimera hybrids, and if you did, why not leave a like? It helps the video quite a bit. And if you are new, consider subscribing to stay up to date with the channel. But just be forewarned, even though, as you know, right now I'm going into details with the Chimera. I'm still learning more and more about them as I go along, so expect later on there will be things that I've missed that I will relate back to the hybrids. For instance, like with the Greyjacks, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be talking a lot about the hybrids with them as well. But one of the things I did want to do is shout out you guys. Thank you for all the nice compliments I got on my face reveal. I was kind of worried about dropping that, and it was a pleasant surprise when I wasn't roasted alive almost immediately. Anyhow, I will drop my Twitter and Discord link in the description if you'd like to follow or join in on that, and I will also drop my Patreon link if you are interested in becoming a supporter of this channel. And speaking of patrons, I would like to thank mine. At the scientist tier, we have Layla Alizarin up first, and then we got Bo and Goodwin holding it down, and last we have Arulam Lupe. Our residents are A. Laurantis, Evan Osborne, and Richard Muhlenberg. With their PhD in genetics, we have Andrew Lawson, Divine Whisper, Laffy No Skill, and Steve N. Holding their masters in biology, we have Adam Hartswick, Brandon Brotherton, Brian H. Briggs, Cameron Smith, Edgy McKee, Scott Grant, and the Otterman. And last but not least, with their bachelors in morphological sciences, we have Ahigao Comics, Alex the Gun Guy, Anthony Wolf, Dustin Ellis, Eric Scott Gillies, Greater Genes 83, Jims, Joseph Radical, Professor Bennett's, and Zachary Baker. Thank you guys for your continued support. So I hope you enjoyed this first biology episode into the hybrid anatomy, and it was longer, so I hope you guys enjoyed that too. Thanks for watching Roanoke Gaming, and I will see y'all in the next one.